In Paris, Guinea's President Alpha Condé sat down with Euronews to discuss the complex challenges facing not only his country, but much of Africa. Condé made a link between terrorism and poverty, saying development is the only solution. Condé also wants to see a new era of equality between France and Africa.
Mr. Alpha Condé,
thank you for accepting our invitation. We're living in a period of globalization of terror, the phenomenon of terrorism. Is there something that Africa lacks so that African countries can face this scourge?
What is fundamentally lacking is development. You know that terrorism flourishes on poverty and injustice. So if terrorism develops in Africa, it's because there's poverty. The first battle is the struggle for development, which allows us to fight both terrorism and emigration. For the time being, we're forced to fight militarily in order to face it. But it's first and foremost the taking of our defense by Africans themselves.
Is there still the possibility of cooperating with the European Union to put in place a sort of control of South-North immigration?
We tell our friends in the EU that we understand their problems. They also know that if our children emigrate, it's not because they want to emigrate, but because they have not found what they want here. We can be a factory for Europe, provided they understand that it's a win-win cooperation, and a cooperation that brings a beneficial partnership to both.
Is food insecurity a factor in this wave of immigration, or is there something else?
We have appealed to all African states and the international community to help our brothers in these countries, and it's a great challenge for us. Obviously, the climate and drought are largely responsible. There are also wars, so we don't want it anymore. That's why we want Africa to grow, so that we can put an end to climate damage, so that we can have efficient agriculture, because if we have successful agriculture, we won't have famine.
What do you blame the EU for in terms of cooperation?
It's not a matter of reproaching the EU, but first and foremost, our objective today is that Africa must first of all rely on its own strength. We have to rely on our own strengths, and we must cooperate with the world, be it the EU, China, India, Brazil. Africans must first begin by counting on themselves, because the development of Africa will be done only by Africans.
Can we take from your remarks that there is a lack of cohesion in the African Union?
But it's the opposite, because today we speak with one voice. It was admitted by consensus that we needed to strengthen our unity, because today we're conscious of the major issues facing Africa, and we can only resolve them together. So there is no longer any cacophony, and we're working with the reforms of the African Union to ensure that we're given the means to face our challenges, which was not the case before.
There is a lot of talk about female genital mutilation. What policies can be implemented, and what do you think is right to find viable solutions to this phenomenon?
It's not just about politics, it's about education, because they are ancestral customs, but they're contrary to the dignity of women. So today, for example, in Guinea, it's a big problem for us. We're lagging behind other countries, and we're determined to catch up. There's politics, there's education, but there are also sanctions. It is by acting on all these levels that we can resolve this question, which is an indignity to women.
Let's return to the relationship between African countries and France. What are we going to do?
We're moving towards cooperation between sovereign states, egalitarian and mutually beneficial cooperation. And we want France to see African states as major sovereign states. And cooperation between Africa and France becoming that of a sovereign state to a sovereign state.
Are you saying that there has not been any peer-to-peer treatment until now?
You know very well that Francophone Africa doesn't get equal treatment, but we have surpassed that today, and we want African countries to be considered by France as it considers Brazil or another country. That's to say, cooperation between sovereign states.
Do you expect to remain at the head of the Guinean state in the next few years to pursue the policies you have initiated?
Why do we never ask this question to the leaders of Asian or European countries? Why is it only to Africans that this question is asked? Why?
I'm asking you. I have no answer.
No, but I'm asking you the question. You should also ask Malaysia or Singapore. Ms. Merkel, are you going to run for a third or fourth term or not? Why do we only ask the Africans?
Sometimes we ask this question.
We want Africa to be major, to be Africans deciding their future, and not to be told what to do and to impose a way of governing us.
I entirely agree with you. This is a question that is legitimate.
No, it's not a legitimate question, but it is, on the contrary, illegitimate, because we want to impose a view that's contrary to what they have done. That's to say, this is what we have done to develop ourselves. We don't want you to do it. How do you want us to develop?
You have often spoken about China.
We have cooperation with China as well as with Europe and with other countries. What we want is cooperation that is beneficial to both parties, cooperation that respects Africa and enables Africa to develop. It doesn't matter if tomorrow it's Martians who come to make cooperation with us. We must stop this fantasy of the Chinese menace, etc. It's a fantasy, and we're not at all sensitive to that.
UNESCO has chosen your capital to be the world's book capital.
It's a tribute to Ghanaian and African writers in general, and we're very proud of this. We'll do everything we can to make this year of the book a success.
Who is the emblematic figure who marked your political movement?
In Africa?
Yes, in Africa.
I think it's obvious. Like every African, it's Mandela, of course. Like any African conscious, it can only be Mandela.
Mr. President, thank you very much for allowing us this interview.
You're welcome.